Hey folks, it's Michael from Offshore Coffee Co., the director of coffee here, and today we're going to go over pour over. Over here we have the king, the icon, the Hario V60. This is kind of the go-to pour over and has been for over a decade. Over here we have like a newer competitor, the origami. This one as well is a very famous pour over dripper that you'll find now in cafes. Over here we have an older one, but still one of my favorites, the Kalita dripper. And then here we have a Hario switch, which kind of combines the drip pour over as well as an immersion brew. So let's go over quickly the differences between them. Over here we have a very large hole on the bottom of it, which allows water to flow really quickly through the coffee. Same thing over here, large. So this one here has smaller holes, and those smaller holes are restrictors essentially. And they stop the water from going through very quickly, and they're much more forgiving and easier to use for beginners. Over here we have the switch, which essentially has a little lever here, which opens and closes that hole. So I can start first by closing that hole and making the coffee sit together with the water in an immersion brew, and then flip that switch, and then it turns into a pour over dripper. The nice thing about pour overs in comparison to, let's say, French presses, is that pour overs allow there to be more complexity and more nuance in the coffee. And it does that because we can add pours or we can subtract pours. And with each pour that we do, we extract just a little different part of the coffee. In the beginning, we're going to extract a lot of the acidic parts. And then in the later part of the brew, we're gonna extract a lot more sweetness and even some pleasant bitterness out of it. In regards to the restrictors, here we can allow ourselves to maybe grind a little bit coarser. For example, if we have a spice grinder instead of a good coffee grinder, and because we have these restrictor holes, the coffee and the water will sit together for a longer amount of time. So it lets you get away with a coarser grind. And then lastly, this immersion brew allows you to be able to brew some coffee in the morning without even thinking about it. I will put coffee in here, hot water in here, let it sit for like 2 or 3 minutes, and then just undo the lever and let the coffee just fall through. Mindless, but also very delicious. So today we're going to be presenting our new single origin coffee, the Costa Rica Las Lajas Natural Anaerobic Double Diamond. A very, very special coffee that we're really excited to introduce. We're going to use our V60 dripper. This is a number 2 size. You're going to need a coffee filter for your dripper, as well as you're going to need a grinder, a pitcher for some hot water, as well as a scale. Again, we like to use a scale in order to be able to be as consistent as possible with our brew. Today, like I said, we're going to use the Las Lajas. Weigh out 25 grams of coffee. 25 grams will result in 400 milliliters of coffee out. It's nice to grind your coffee fresh because it will stop it from staling and oxidizing quickly. If you grind your coffee fresh, it's going to taste much better, as well as if there's any sort of adjustments that you need to make to your coffee, you can do it with your grinder. This grinder right here from Fellow is a good entry-level grinder for drip coffee, pour-over coffee, Mr. Coffees, or French presses. If you're looking for something for espresso, I would not recommend this grinder here, but I would offer other suggestions if you need to. Just comment them below and I'm sure I'll answer them. So next step, we're gonna grind our coffee here. I like to start my grinder before I put the coffee in here. This just makes sure that the grinder is going and makes for a more consistent grind. Once this coffee is done grinding, we have a little lever here that allows me to tap out any coffee that might be stuck in there. Great. And now I have my ground coffee. What we're looking for out of the coffee grind size is something that kind of resembles like a coarse salt. The other great part of grinding your coffee fresh is that you actually get to smell the coffee. When the coffee is pre-ground, what ends up happening is a lot of that coffee scent goes away. The amount of people that I've persuaded to buy a coffee grinder and are just incredibly excited by the idea of their place smelling like coffee every morning, honestly, it's just such a treat. So now that we have our ground coffee here, the next step is we're gonna prepare our brewer. I'm gonna put my brewer on my scale, and I'm gonna take my filter and I'm gonna prep it. The way that I do that is, as you can see, it's folded one way. My next step is I'm going to fold it the opposite way to kind of create this cone shape, then drop it in here. And the next step is I'm going to heat up my vessel by pre-wetting this filter. Sometimes folks will say that it takes away the papery taste of the filter. I find that what's actually more important is that the vessel is preheated. If we don't preheat our vessel, the vessel then becomes like a heat sink and you just lose all of that heat. This water is preheated at 200 degrees Fahrenheit on my gooseneck kettle, and this is because this kettle is kind of expensive. But if you have a gooseneck kettle and it's not temperature driven, or if you have, let's say, a stovetop kettle, then what I would recommend you do is you bring it up to boil and let it sit for about a minute off boil. And roughly it should get to somewhere between 200 and 205 degrees Fahrenheit. My next step is to zero out my scale again and to put my coffee inside of my V60. As you can see here, I have a mound on top of that coffee. And my goal is to make sure I hit all of the coffee with my water, so I'm going to take this and flatten it out. I don't want to play with it too much, I just want it to be flat. Also, due to the cone-like shape in here, oftentimes folks recommend putting a little divot in the center in order to make sure that it's as even as possible. And now we're all set to start pouring. So I have my 200 degree Fahrenheit filtered water. Coffee is 98% water. So if your water doesn't taste good, your coffee is not going to taste good. So make sure that you filter your water. I'm gonna zero out my scale. And the last thing that I'm gonna do is I'm gonna have a little bit of a plan before I start. So I like to write the plan in my notes app or on a piece of paper, in a recipe book, whatever it is that you'd like. And here it says that I'm gonna start with 50 grams for my bloom. So we'll start with 50 grams of water into this vessel to start as we start the timer. I'm gonna do my best to hit all of the coffee in 50 grams. Now I'm in my bloom phase. This is when the coffee starts growing. It looks like it's blooming, literally, and that's why we call it the bloom phase. It will start to expand. That CO2 gas that is inside of the coffee during the roasting process starts to escape out. And so we allow the coffee to just get pre-wet and to bloom in order to get all of that CO2 gas out. Great, at 45 seconds, I'm gonna brew up to 150 grams. And for my first pour, I'm looking to agitate the coffee pretty aggressively because look at all of that gas that is trying to come off of the coffee. So in the first minute, I got to 150 grams and I'm gonna wait until 110 to do my second pour. Great, I'm at 110. Now I'm gonna go to 250. And again, I'm going in an up-down motion because I really want to agitate this coffee because I want to get rid of all that CO2 as best as I can. Great, 250. At 130, I'm gonna go to 330. This third pour, I'm a little more gentle, but still a little bit agitating. And really it's my final pour that I'm going to be the most gentle that I can. At 150, we're going up to 400. As you can see, the gas is less apparent, but it's still there. Perfect, 400. And I ended at about 2 minutes and 5 seconds. I'm gonna give it a little swirl just to even out the bed, not too much. That's enough. And now we're in our drawdown phase where the water draws through the coffee and hopefully does it as evenly as possible. I'm looking to end this brew at around 230 to 245 because that's where I found that the Las Lajas tastes the best. It's not too slow, like 3 minutes and 30 seconds. It's rather quick. Great, we're at 243. The water has gone through the coffee bed. As you can see, we have quite a flat bed, which is a result of our swirling. And we can put this away. And here we have our coffee. So something about coffee and pour overs is we talked about the ways in which with each pour, we're getting a little bit something different out of the coffee. And so if I were to pour this coffee directly, what's gonna happen is the bottom is going to be one extraction, the middle is gonna have some other components of the coffee, and the third part of it is going to be a different part of the coffee. And so in order to make sure that it's nice and homogenized, I'm going to swirl it. That swirling is going to cause the coffee to de-stratify and make sure that the whole entire beverage is the same drink. Additionally, I'm cooling it down. Oftentimes people really like a hot piping cup of coffee, but the reality is your taste buds cannot taste anything if it's too hot. You want to make sure that it is warm enough to drink, but finding that nice balance where you can actually taste the coffee and see what's going on in it. And now the last step is to enjoy. I like to smell the coffee first. This coffee is roasted pretty light. It's a natural coffee and an anaerobic coffee, which essentially means that it's processed in a way where it's really highlighting a lot of its fruity characteristics. This is nowhere close to a traditional cup of coffee. I'm getting a lot of fruit notes, a lot of strawberry, some kiwi, a little bit of some boozy notes out of it as well. But essentially, this is a really fun coffee to try with someone else, talk about it, and essentially it's just a really fun coffee to try. This brew recipe is specifically for the Costa Rica Las Lajas. However, other brew recipes might exist for other coffees. Different roast, different varietal, different origin is all going to change the best way to brew that cup of coffee. So stay tuned to find out more about all of our coffees.